So this is the new guidance website. I would encourage you to check it out. We're not going to go too in-depth on this tonight, but just know there's a lot of information on here, and I would encourage parents and students. There's information here for students as well. We list all the various guidance events throughout the course of the school year for parents and students. So I would suggest taking a look at that. Again, as you're all realizing pretty quickly, one of the best things you can do with this whole process is to be organized and avoid any surprises. So knowing timelines, knowing what's coming up, knowing when deadlines are, they're all very important pieces to this process, especially now in the fall. So before we jump in, the format of tonight is each guidance staff member is going to take a different piece of the process. And as we kind of progress through the night, after each counselor wraps up their individual session, again, we'd be more than willing to take any questions, and then we'll stick around at the end for any questions that you may have. Just a quick introduction. I wanted to make sure everyone knows who the guidance staff members are, especially those that are here tonight. We have Ms. Stephanie Diozzi, Mrs. Chrissy Concession, Mrs. Molly Leary, Miss Emily Minty, and in the back, handing out the folders, is Mrs. Gloria Ortazik. Staff members that aren't here, Jackie Rogers, she's our school adjustment counselor, and also Lisa Smith, she's one of our guidance counselors. Also, our secretaries, who you're probably going to get to know even better this year, Mrs. Kavanaugh and Mrs. Lewis. Again, that's who usually answers the phones when you call the office. And they do a lot to make sure transcripts, applications are submitted at the appropriate time and in an organized fashion. So again, each council is going to take a different facet of the college application process, and to start, it's going to be Ms. Diozzi.
Hi. So I'm going to review where seniors should be at in the process. And some of where they should be at will be determined by when they're going to be submitting their first application. But most students at this point should be finalizing a list of colleges. You should have one that's working. You may be expanding it a little based on colleges you may have visited over the summer, or narrowing a little based on colleges you visited over the summer. Remember, it's equally important to understand why you dislike a college as it is to understand why you like one. And do you feel okay with this list? Do you feel like maybe you need more realistic schools, more safety schools? Maybe you want to add a reach school to your list. I'll talk about those qualifications in a couple of slides, but you should feel like your list is working for you. You're going to start your application process pretty much based on when your first deadline is. So if you're applying early action somewhere and the deadline is November 1st, you need to start getting all of your materials together. You need to be meeting with your counselor. But if your first deadline isn't until January 15th, like the regular decision deadline for UMass Amherst, you can take a little more time and take a little bit more of the first semester to get everything going. You do need to be communicating this with your counselor. We do not want to be taken by surprise by a sudden November 1st deadline, because we have paperwork that we need to get in order for you as well. Next. Okay, so I mentioned reach, realistic, and safety schools, and students should have a working list that includes a selection from all of these different types of schools. A reach school is a school for which your GPA and SAT or ACT scores don't quite match up, so you would be relying on other things like the essay or an interview to help you get into that school. A realistic school is where your test scores and GPA match what they're looking for. And a safety school is a school where your GPA and test scores exceed what they're looking for. You should want to go to your safety school. The safety school is not a throwaway school. It's not a school that you're just like, I'll apply there, whatever. You should want to go there. It should be a school that you appreciate and would be happy at if you got in.
A financial safety school is one where your family and you, that it's affordable, that you know that it's a backup if your financial aid packages don't play out the way that you think that they might. And Mr. Adebato will be talking more about financial aid in detail as we go through the evening. Oh, one more note. You should be checking the scattergrams on Naviance, which is actual graphed data that shows what the likelihood is that you might get into a school. Because whether it's a REACH, realistic, or a safety school depends on you. Your REACH school might be someone else's realistic school. So it really is on an individual basis. And again, I talked a little bit about these deadlines, but I'll explain them in more detail. Regular decision is sort of the old, it's based on the traditional model of college applications. Back when I was in high school, we applied in the spring, and the deadlines usually range from January to March, and everyone needs to let the college know by May. Early action is also when you apply earlier. The first early action deadlines that we see are summer in October, November 1st, November 15th, and December. That's the admissions option that allows you to get an answer in advance, but doesn't require you to commit to the school. You might also find that a specific program requires you to apply early action. Sometimes if you're being recruited as an athlete, you need to apply early. A lot of nursing programs require students to apply early action as well. And you usually get your answer by the first of the year. Early decision is the option where you apply to a school, and if you get in, you commit to going there. There are some financial aid considerations to think of when you apply early decision. The college usually guarantees that they'll meet your expected family contribution. They'll meet that benchmark for financial aid. But you really should understand the affordability of the college before you commit to going ED. The counselor signs off on early decision, the parents sign off, and the student signs off. If you're admitted early decision, we are required to rescind, you're required to rescind applications to other colleges, and we're not allowed to send transcripts to other colleges. So it's a pretty big deal, and it's definitely something you should keep us in the loop on. Yep. Oh, did I? Oh, okay. Why don't I finish the application types and then we'll go back to visiting. And then rolling admission is when the colleges just, as soon as they get the application, they review it and admit. There are a couple schools, for example, Quinnipiac College has rolling admission, but they still actually want you to apply earlier. But rolling gives you a little bit more time to get your application in when you feel comfortable. Again, however, note that certain programs like nursing, sometimes like performing arts, if they need you to have an audition, they're going to still want you to apply early. We skipped a slide about visiting schools. So the same research tools still apply in senior year. You can go on a college-sponsored tour, and when you do that, we also recommend that you go on the information session and meet with admissions and learn all about getting into the school. They have lots of open houses in the fall, especially colleges in New England because it's so beautiful, and that's usually like a festival. Has anyone been to a college open house? Yeah, professors are usually available, performing arts groups perform. It's a really nice day. A self-directed tour, maybe your family's on their way to somewhere else and you get a map from the admissions office and drive yourself through the campus or walk through the campus. And then virtual tours are recommended, especially when colleges are far away, where the cost would be prohibitive if you wanted to fly there. You can always visit the campus online and take a look that way. We have college admissions representatives visiting Burlington High, I think we got the last one in through November 19th. So these are admissions reps from all over the country who will be coming to meet with students. Students must sign up online in advance, and then they get a pass to meet with the admissions rep from the guidance secretary the morning of the visit. That conversation is very similar to an information session, so some of the information might be repetitive, but it's a really good opportunity to actually meet the admissions rep who might be reading your application face to face. By visiting a college, by touring out online, by contacting admissions, you're demonstrating interest. For some colleges, this is very important. They want to know that your application, that they're a priority for you and that you're interested in attending. And then where were we? Here are some examples of reach colleges. So the colleges on the left are reaches, for the person who's first in the class. They're just very competitive. We all know how competitive college admissions are in the United States nowadays. The schools on the right might be slightly less competitive, but they're still have very high requirements for getting in. Northeastern and UMass Amherst have gotten much more competitive over the last decade. We have not really seen any advantage to applying early to those schools to getting in. Our data still shows that early or regular decision still sort of gets the same admissions results. But for some of these private schools, an early application might statistically give you an advantage to getting in. And that's also something you should talk to your counselor about. For the state college and university system, it's very formulaic. They look very closely at GPA and SAT scores. For some of the schools, letters of recommendations and activity lists aren't even required. Students are welcome to send them, but they're not always considered in the admissions process. All of the classes that you take at Burlington High, English, math, social studies, language, meet the requirements for all of the state colleges and universities. So that's pretty much built in to our program of studies. Your GPA needs to be a 3.0, and there's no matching SAT or ACT score. But if your GPA is below a 3.0, you need to have that much higher an SAT or ACT score. And we'll show you that on the next slide. You can't, unfortunately, get into a four-year school with a 2.0, with a GPA lower than a 2. But there are ways to be able to transfer into the four-year schools that I'll also go over. Each college has updated information. Quite frankly, some of the state colleges and universities are changing their admissions requirements yearly. Some of them are SAT optional for the school, for certain programs. So we strongly advise that you look at these websites carefully to know what each school is requiring at this point in time. The sliding scale is for students whose GPAs are under a 3. So I like to say that the SAT or ACT is inversely proportional to it. So if your GPA is, say, a 2.5, you need to have at least a 990 on the SAT or a 19 on the ACT in order to be considered for a state university, like Framingham, Fitchburg, or Salem State. And then there's another statistic for a GPA of 2.0. For all four, well, for the UMasses, it's a slightly higher SAT. You can see it goes up to 1030 for a GPA of a 2.5, and then a 20 on the ACT. UMass Amherst is that much more competitive. They just have a lot more applicants. So even though that is the minimum formula, technically, for all the schools, for UMass Amherst and even for certain programs at UMass Lowell, the GPA and SAT scores still need to be higher than that. They don't use an SAT writing score, but most students, I don't think, are really taking the SAT with writing much anymore. And generally, the thing that they're looking for is that 3.0 GPA. That's the main thing that they're looking for. So the SAT and ACT scores are less in play when the GPA is where it needs to be. The mass transfer system, they now call this, the new name for this is A to B, which stands for Associate's to Bachelor's degree. And this is where you can start at one of the community colleges, and there's an automatic transfer system, as long as you're getting good grades, to go right into a four-year college. And it is a written agreement. There is also a really cool website where you can sort of plan your majors or study path and see what colleges, what four-year schools you might be able to slide right into after doing a year or two at a community college. As long as you have a GPA of a 2.5, you can transfer right in as long as they have room and that they have your major. Not all state colleges have all majors. And then the higher your GPA, you really start to qualify for some substantial tuition reduction. it's called the Commonwealth Commitment Rebate, they call ComCom, and mass transfer tuition credit, which you get once you commit to going into the state university system this way. If you also commit to one of that, they lock in your tuition and fees, so if those things are raised over the 3 or 4 years down the road that you're in the school, you will not have to pay an increase in fees or tuition. But just note that Mass College of Art and Mass Maritime have their own requirements. For example, Mass Art, you'd have to do a portfolio, and it's not as simple a slide into that school. And now, Mrs. Leary, continue the conversation.
Thank you. Thank you all for coming tonight. I like to switch over to this side. So when it comes to submitting applications, we don't reveal the details typically until senior year because there's no need to really. So some of the student responsibilities, it is up to the students to do their research. Unfortunately, there is not a central location where students can come to guidance or even go online and find all of the details for all of their schools, deadlines and what is required and all of that. So they have, I know it's tedious, but they have to do that. So we recommend, you know, whatever works for the student. If they want to create a spreadsheet, we also, the colored transcript request slips that I'll talk about in a few minutes are also helpful for students organizing themselves as well. But it is up to students to really study the college websites of the colleges that they're planning to apply to know the deadlines. Do they even have early action, or are they only regular decision? Are they test optional, or do I have to submit my test scores? How many letters of recommendation are required? Things like that. So it is up to the students to know all of that. It is also up to the students to adhere to any guidance deadlines and to know those and recognize those. Please make and keep regular appointments is something we always emphasize. The fall is very busy, as you would imagine, in guidance. And so we, you know, just to be respectful not only of the counselor's time, but of other students who may need appointments as well. Check your email weekly is what we always tell students, especially senior year, because you're going to miss out on information or you know, events or things like that if you're not checking your email regularly. And use Naviance. So a lot of times students get confused. They think, oh, well, I'm using the Common Application website and all of my information is there. My colleges are in there. Why do I need to use Naviance? And the next slide is why. So we use Naviance to send transcripts and letters of recommendation primarily to schools, whether they're Common Application schools or not. We also use it for the Common Application teacher evaluation forms in the secondary school report. And students can use Naviance, of course, for scattergrams, which is something we introduced to them last year. That is the graphs that are available using data from BHS alumni. And it's a really great resource. It's my favorite tool on Naviance to be able to figure out if a school is a reach, a realistic, or a safety. It is also how students sign up for the college visits. So for when the reps are coming here in the next few months, they need to sign up through Naviance. So that's another reason to use it. It's also a way to track application deadlines once all of your colleges are listed in there. And it's also where we list our scholarship applications. So not just local and community scholarships, but also we list some national scholarships as well. So right now, I believe, as of last week, there were only 6 scholarships listed in there. As of now, today I checked it with a student and there were 20 in there. So it's another reason to be using Naviance. So who sends what is always the big question. And once we get to senior year, it's not like it was 15, 20 years ago when we got to send a nice, neat package of papers in a manila envelope to colleges. Everything is coming from different places now at different times, and the colleges create a file for the student once they receive the first piece of the application, and then as they receive additional pieces of the application, they add it to the student's file until the application is complete. So BHS is responsible for sending the transcript, and we usually typically send it automatically with a school profile, which will be explained for those of you who don't know what the profile is. We'll explain it in a few slides. We also send our recommendations through Naviance. So any faculty members from BHS have a Naviance account and they upload their letters directly to Naviance. And we're able to send them electronically through Naviance. It's also how we are also responsible for sending supplemental materials that cannot be sent electronically. One example of this is some colleges might require a graded paper from a student, in which case, that can be tricky to get to the college. So we are happy to do that, send it through the regular mail. The student is responsible for of course, filling out their online application, but also sending it. So clicking submit by that deadline, whatever that deadline may be. And they are responsible for any supplements that a college might require. And then typically when they submit an application, they will be prompted to pay an application fee or indicate that they have a fee waiver. So the student is responsible for that as well. And then the essay is typically just a copy and paste. Most students are working on their application, but then also working on their essay separately. And when they finalize it, when they've proofread it a million times, they are just copying and pasting it to the application, the online application, for the most part. So that's their responsibility as well. Sending SAT or ACT scores is their responsibility. We will go over that in a few slides. We'll get into more detail about that. Any required financial aid forms, so the FAFSA, and another one you may have heard of is the CSS profile, which is required by a lot of private institutions. And then occasionally there might be additional financial aid forms that are required. So in addition to students studying the application portion or the required section of the website of a college, you also need to study the financial aid section and what do I need to submit properly for financial aid to this college. And the last thing that a student might be responsible for is other supplemental materials, and an example of that might be an art portfolio where they submit that online to Slide Room is a popular website to submit art portfolios. That's one example of that. Okay, so by the way, I did flip those two slides, so in the packet it looks differently, and it's because I just felt like the flow was a little better when explaining it. So reminders when preparing to apply. Students have to complete the FERPA waiver in their common application before then going to Naviance to match their common application account to Naviance so that both are linked, and that's how we're able to submit things electronically through Naviance to Common App schools and then also to non-Common App schools. So the FERPA waiver, for those of you who aren't familiar with it, is that waiver where you indicate, do I waive or not waive my right to view letters of recommendation down the road when I enroll at a college? This is something that counselors typically walk students through in their small groups. They have them do it. I usually just walk students through it in a one-on-one meeting. It can be sometimes confusing to find the FERPA waiver in the Common App, so we're happy to do that if they just let us know they're having trouble finding that. So the next responsibility would be to submit a colored transcript request. Usually you are prepared. So we have a different colored slip for each counselor. And I always joke to the students that, oh my gosh, you're going to get sick of hearing about pink slips by the end of the year. Mine are pink. Every counselor has a different color. And students need to submit one colored slip for each college that they apply to their counselor at least 10 school days before the college's deadline. And this is what ensures that we send what we need to send and that the students know what they're responsible for sending. So it does not mean the student has to apply, click submit on their application 10 school days before the deadline. It just means they need to submit those colored slips so that we have enough time to prepare what we need to prepare in the guidance department and send it out. The student still has, up until the day of their deadline, to click submit on their applications. And it gives them time, you know, if they realize that they forgot something, or if we, you know, if they realize they need to tweak something along the way. It is the student's responsibility to send their application, whether it's via Common App or the college's website, which would be a private application. It's their responsibility to pay the application fee and indicate that they have a fee waiver if they're eligible. So any student who's eligible for free or reduced lunch can talk to their counselor about a fee waiver. Another way to get a fee waiver is sometimes if you do a tour or a visit at a school, they might just hand them out. We've actually had reps when they do the visits here at BHS, anyone in attendance, they might hand out, as a token of appreciation, they might hand out some fee waivers here as well. It is optional to print a copy of your application and payment receipt. So the transcript, as many of you know, it is a one piece of the student's permanent academic record. It consists of final grades only for grades 9 through 12, and it includes their GPA, and it is required by every college and university. It is the most important piece in the admission process. Here is a very tiny example of a transcript. So we've broken it down for you. This is the top. It shows, as you can see, weighted GPA, well, general information about the student and the high school, and then the weighted GPA there on the right, total credits. The middle portion is next. And you'll see 4 different squares, one for each grade in high school. So you'll notice that it has the courses the student took, along with the levels, and just the final grade, and then credits earned. So for grade 12, it's going to look different depending upon when the student applies in their senior year. So if a student applies November 1st, we don't have first quarter grades at that point. So what the college is getting is a grade 12 box with senior year courses and levels, and that's it. And then as soon as first quarter grades are added to the transcript, we would send it to those schools. And it's usually around the middle of November, usually 13th, 14th, 15th. So if any student applying early, the college is going to see their first quarter grades. Okay, so that's why it's important to start off strong. The bottom of the transcript just tells you the details of how to read it and what everything means, essentially. And there are 2 transcript request forms that we have described to students. And one is the colored form for each counselor. That is for colleges specifically. So applying to a college, the colored slip is what you need. There is a separate form if students ever need an unofficial transcript. So if they maybe want to share it with a coach at a college, or if they're going for an interview, or they're just going for a visit and an admissions rep has asked them to bring a transcript, then they would come to guidance, and right on the counter with our secretaries, there is a stack of forms that they can fill out that they would like to request an unofficial transcript. They toss it back in the box, and our registrar will have it for them within 24 to 48 hours to pick up. So we just ask that if you need that, try not to wait until the day of. And now Ms. Minty.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. I guess I'll move back to this side. So Mrs. Leary had mentioned the school profile. We automatically include that with all the transcripts because while many schools around here especially might be very familiar with Burlington and our programs, not everyone is. So this helps the admissions officers to understand, how our GPA weighting system works, what courses we offer, what courses people typically take at different years, and also just what our general test scores are. So they have a sense of, is this student average, above average, et cetera, for the class. It also gives a brief profile about Burlington High School in general, what the area is like. There's actually, we don't rank, as most high schools don't anymore, but what we do on that profile is we do have bar graphs showing roughly how many students fall within certain GPA ranges for this class. So they also have a sense, don't worry about the fact there's no rank, but they'll have a sense of, are you kind of in the middle, are you toward the top, or something else. That's, I think I said that in different order, but that's pretty much what's on our profile. Okay, so the recommendation letters, again, you had an introduction to that, but it is very important to check the college requirements, as Ms. Leary said. While most colleges generally having 2 letters is a good rule of thumb, there are some that may not want any letters, some might limit you to only 1 letter, and some might have specific requirements about what type of teacher the letter has to be from. So it's very important at this stage of the game to look at each individual college website and make sure that the people that you are planning to have write your letters are matching up with what your colleges are requiring. And the guidance letter is almost always required. Occasionally, if it's not, students can let us know, but it's generally the college at a minimum requires the guidance letter, and then sometimes often also requires teachers. It is critical also to let everyone writing your letter know about that first deadline at this point. I recommend at least a month in advance. That's really a minimum, not because it takes us 1 month to write 1 letter, but because we're all writing so many letters and we have to budget in our extra time when we're going to fit those in. You don't want your letter to be rushed under any circumstances. You want this to be the best letter it can be. The teachers do upload their letters onto Naviance, and actually there's a spot on Naviance as well where students, if they request the teacher letters there as a follow-up to asking in person, it does help the teachers make it easier for them to upload it. So I know that's something I showed my students in my groups, and many counselors do as well. And so most teachers, again, the ones that are here, we're going to be sending electronically through Naviance. Occasionally, someone might have a teacher they had them last year, but that teacher has moved, and they're still getting a letter from that teacher. Or maybe you have a letter from an employer or a coach. If there's someone that's not a teacher in the school, we're still happy to send those letters for you. We'd just be mailing them instead of sending them through Naviance. So in those cases, it's important to just have 1 signed copy of the letter, so it's official. So not just a letter through email. We don't forward it through email. We put it in the mail, so it's important that it still look formal. So sometimes someone may scan it in with a signature, that's fine, and send it that way. We just need the 1 copy, and we'll make additional copies. Great idea to send thank you notes. It is a time-consuming process, and I know we all feel good as we're writing the letters. We feel even better when we're appreciated for it, of course. And in your packet, there's a general form that many teachers use if some student might approach a teacher and they say, sure, I'd be happy to write it, please just bring me the form. The form that they would be talking about is the one in your packet. But not all teachers use it. Some teachers have their own system instead. So I recommend to my students just ask the teacher, first of all, whether they are willing to write your letter. And when they say yes, they'll let you know what they need. There's also a parent questionnaire in there, which can be very helpful to us as far as just, again, having more material. This is for the guidance counselors when we're writing our letters. Okay, that activity list too. So activity list was a major, assignment last year. So in all our groups, we had deadlines for our juniors to turn in their activity lists. Hopefully your sons and daughters and those of you here tonight already did that. So this year it's important just to look at it again and update it. If there's something new you did over the summer, or if last year you didn't list things from 12th grade, you want to make sure that you update it now to include 12th grade. And so sometimes some college applications do have a spot where you can upload this activity list. However, it's not a replacement for the fact that there's also an activities section on the Common App. That can be confusing. But we've had feedback. There are some colleges that it's a big pet peeve of theirs if someone clearly kind of rushes through the activities section and uploads their letter, kind of assuming that's going to take its place. Some colleges ignore the activity list and focus just on the activity section. So it is really important to take that activity section very seriously and assume that someone may not see that activity list. The activity list certainly will help you fill out the activity section. So you might be wondering, why do we make you do this at all? Well, there are the colleges that do look at it, but even very importantly around here, most of our local scholarship applications that will be coming up later this year will require the activity list as part of the scholarship applications. So having it ready now is also going to help them out for that purpose. So it's important to make sure your counselor always has a copy of your latest activity list too. There's a number of opportunities that cross our paths at any given time. It's hard to predict, where someone might approach us and say, you know, I heard about this student. Do you have their activity list? I'd like to consider them for this opportunity. So if we have it on hand, it's always better that we just have that. There are samples on Naviance of some do's and don'ts as well. The essay, that for me was certainly the hardest part of the whole application. Probably for most people it is. Some people do actually enjoy writing them. And honestly, in picking a topic, I think that's the hardest thing because the topics are really very broad. But the main thing is it should just be something that comes naturally to you, and as you're writing it, it's not that hard to write. Because what the colleges, they want to get a taste of the fact that you're a good writer, but beside that, mostly they just want to get a sense of who you are. So it's not a place to try to pretend to be someone that you think they want you to be. It's to truly just be genuinely yourself. You come across as not a generic person, but you come across as a real person. They're eager to meet you and have you on their campus. Our English classes, people are fortunate at this school. This was not the case at my school, but our English department does build into the curriculum in the fall here to have the essay as an assignment in class. It varies by teacher exactly when it's happening. For regular decision deadlines, certainly it's going to be covered. For early deadlines, we probably advised our students last year, I know I did, that you don't want to count on it getting taken care of in class. You need to be more proactive on your own. But I'm hearing in general from my students that in most classes, at least they're beginning that essay process. So that is very helpful. Do be aware, again, a good reason to not wait until the last minute is that there's the one main essay that the colleges require, but then the colleges do sometimes, not always, have an additional essay question or more in their application. Sometimes it's actually labeled as a writing supplement on the Common App, but sometimes it might appear there's not a writing supplement, and instead when you go to the My Colleges section and click on the individual questions, they might add in their little writing question in there. Often it's a question about why are you interested in applying to this college. Sometimes, though, it might be something a little more creative. So that's something to absolutely look into well in advance of your deadline. What else have I here? Yes, word count is really important. So there are many cases where if you go over the word count is the more dangerous thing. Sometimes it'll just cut off. So it's not a good idea. More is not better. You want to stick to the word count that they specify. Definitely proofread. And in addition to English classes, we're also going to be having a panel coming up pretty soon here. That's next Friday, I believe. Where we'll have a panel of admissions officers who will be sharing their advice about the essay and answering questions as well from the seniors. Okay, so the testing. There are many colleges now, more and more, that are test optional and don't require test scores, but there are still quite a few colleges where the SAT or ACT score is a required part of the application. And when they say SAT or ACT, truly they have no preference. Maybe 20 years ago there were some that very clearly preferred one or the other. Nowadays, you don't have to worry about is one better or worse. Whatever is better or worse is the test that you naturally did better on and have the higher score on. That's the test you would send. SAT subject tests are very rarely required now, but there are a few of the more selective colleges, or sometimes depending on very selective majors like engineering or nursing, that may require a particular SAT subject test. Most students would have taken their SAT or ACT last spring, And then now there are some students that if they wanted to retake it, they may be retaking it this fall. In terms of having your scores ready for the deadlines, January is the very latest that you would be taking those tests this year. And there is in your packet a list of, in case you haven't already registered for a test this year and know that you wanted to, it lists what the SAT and ACT and the SAT subject test dates and registration deadlines are. Okay, so sending the test scores is the most important thing at this point, and this is one of the first things I mentioned to my students in September, because compared to the rest of the parts of the application, this is the one that has to be handled the most in advance. As it says up here, believe it or not, it takes 3 to 4 weeks on average for the college to receive a test score after it's requested online. So the student requests the score report online directly from the College Board for SAT or on the ACT website for the ACT. And unlike most everything we've all gotten so used to nowadays, things we order online, we tend to get within a couple days. Test scores are not at all this way. So, you know, if you have a November 1st deadline at this point, this is the time to be sending your score. Don't panic if you're taking the October test. That test can still get there by November, but what you can't do is wait to get your score back and then send it. You would have to arrange to send it in advance. The good news about sending them in advance is actually if you are registered to take an October test or a November test, you still have an opportunity now to send some score reports for free. Whereas after the fact, unfortunately, it costs $12 per score report. When you're registered for a test, you can list up to 4 colleges to automatically send your scores for free. So that saves roughly $50. I highly, highly recommend it, even though I know it's maybe a terrifying thought. You don't know what your scores are going to be yet. However, if you select to send all your scores, so you're taking it now, you took it last year, in a worst case scenario, if your scores are terrible now, the colleges get both reports, but the admissions office is only going to focus on your highest scores. And in most cases for people, they actually have kind of a mix, where maybe one day they had a higher math score, another day they had a higher reading score. So when you send all the scores, they pull out the best from each time that you send. That is your choice. Your choice is not, unfortunately, to just pick your best math score to send and to pick your best reading score to send. Your choice is either send all my scores, meaning spring and fall, or I'm going to choose just to send my spring or just my fall. That's what score choice refers to. ACT is very similar, though of course the scoring system is a little different. It's more just picking the particular date, though, for ACT. You have to select and submit them separately for each one. But they also provide those 4 free score reports, and it's roughly $12 per score report after you get the scores back. Communicating with admissions. Don't be afraid to do this, please. The admissions officers are in this business because they truly love high school and college-age students. They want to be talking them through the process and getting to know them and assisting them. It makes a really wonderful impression on an admissions officer when they receive a call or an email from a student, especially a call from a student. So it really should be the student and not the parent. If you can project a little bit into the future, in a college environment, the colleges are seeing the current seniors now, they are adults. And so having a parent intervene on their behalf does not send a good impression. It sends an impression that they're not adults and they're not going to be capable of navigating in the college. So it should be the student reaching out directly. And when they do, those admissions officers are going to be extremely friendly and helpful. They may even be able to offer you the best advice based on your test scores and your situation of whether you should apply early or regular, whether you should send your test scores or not send your test scores if it's test optional. Don't hesitate to ask them those questions. If you are sending an email, it should be professional. So, it should say, dear person, not just starting out and sign it. But generally, it should be written a little more formally than a text, for example. And if you are going to be doing an interview, which I would generally also recommend, interviews are very rarely required anymore, but they almost always are going to help. They're going to be neutral or they're going to help. So the major reason being that demonstrated interest category again. The colleges are receiving thousands of applications, and they're not always sure of the applications they're receiving. Did this person just throw the application in at the last minute and they're not really interested, or is this their favorite school? If you take the time to do an interview, and let's say they're comparing you with a candidate who has very similar credentials, but you took the time to do an interview and the other person did not, most likely they're going to choose you. Your counselor, sorry, the whole point, what reminded me to mention it, is if you're nervous, we are happy to meet with you and do a little mock interview, kind of suggest questions you might want to think about and give you a little practice. Okay. And so how parents can help, not by calling the admissions office, but if there are restrictions that are really important, like your child is very interested in going to the West Coast, but no way are you letting that happen, let them know about that in advance so they don't get their heart set on some place that's just not going to happen. On the other hand, don't put restrictions based on just sticker price of the college. So when Mr. Adebato goes into financial aid, he may, or if you come to financial aid next week, they'll get into this in far more detail. The price that's listed for tuition at a school is not the same price that everyone pays that goes to the school. It's all based on financial aid. So in some cases, depending on your financial situation, the more expensive school could end up being affordable for you or even cheaper for you than one that looks cheaper. It's important to know your financial limits, but also to investigate that fully and not just look at the sticker price. It is okay to help assist in reminding your son or daughter of their deadlines, because these deadlines are more serious than just having a paper due for your English teacher. They're not negotiable. If you miss the deadline, there's thousands of people who didn't miss the deadline, and you can't turn things in a day late. So keeping to the deadlines is so important. And seniors who are here, please welcome people to help remind you of the deadlines, because it is that important. Try not to nag, though. I don't like that word, but and make sure that the student is driving the process. However, and actually I had a doctor's appointment this morning, and my doctor said this was actually the advice. She heard this from her guidance department as well, and it really helped in her family. Instead of constantly, every day your son or daughter comes home, asks them about their deadlines or asks them about what they're doing with college, try to agree upon one day a week that you're going to talk about it at a particular time. It works much better for everyone. So for you, it helps you out as a parent that we are going to talk about this eventually, so it takes some of that pressure off. But especially for the seniors, it is extremely stressful at this time of your life that pretty much everyone you interact with as a senior is constantly asking you about college and your admissions process, including us, unfortunately. I feel guilty of this, but as a parent, you want to remember there's other important parts about them as well, and let them be themselves and have a life outside of just college admissions. As we said, let them make the contacts, though. Financial aid is the major part you should be working on to help with. So the application, the student should be doing. That shouldn't be you doing the application, but the financial aid application is a very different story. Financial aid application is mostly the parent's financial information. So most seniors are not going to know how to fill that out. It's important that you help in filling that form out. And to just generally be a cheerleader, like I said, this is an extremely stressful time. And I think for most seniors, in the back of their mind, they're very nervous of what's going to happen if I just don't get in anywhere. And is my parent going to be disappointed that I don't get into this or that place? So make sure they really believe and know that you truly do love them regardless. First of all, they are going to get in, especially if they're meeting with us and they have a nice balanced list. But in a worst case scenario, if they didn't, you would help them through it, and you would still be proud of them and love them. Very cheesy, but really, really important. And now Ms. Watazik is next.
I'm going to move to the other side. So I know this is a lot of information, and it's I'm sure overwhelming for all of you as well, but the packet has a great deal of supplements as well as our guidance blog. I'm going to be talking a little bit about other considerations. So if your son or daughter is contemplating playing a Division I or II sport, they're probably talking to the coaches, and this is something that they've been planning on. If they haven't been on the NCAA clearinghouse, they should do that immediately. The website is very good at walking you as parents and walking the students through the process. It is very detailed on the courses that are necessary and the GPA requirements as well as the standardized testing requirements. And it's really important that they log in now if that's something they're looking into, because they also have to request a transcript and we will process that in guidance. But please see your guidance counselor if you have any questions on that, because that's a very individualized process. For the next slide, students with a documented disability, students who have received support services here in high school, if it's something that you would like to look into at the college level, that is also a very individualized process in the sense that you reach out to the college, but you also need to have a conversation with your guidance counselor, because if that is something you want us to include in your admissions information that we sent out, we need your permission. We would send also testing, and we would obviously like to talk to you about the process and what it means at the UMass system. If your your student releases information, then it's a possibility that they will be most likely be waived from the standardized testing requirement, which means they wouldn't have to release SATs or ACTs. So each school has that information on their admissions profile, and please feel free to talk to us about that process. What is a gap year? So a gap year is something that's really taken on much more of a movement than it did, I would say even 10 years ago. More students are looking into this option. It is time that you intentionally take after high school. So you're most likely planning to still apply to schools, and we would encourage you to do so, but you're not sure if you want to go directly into the college to the college setting yet, but you want to use that time in between to possibly travel, to possibly volunteer. Programs like City Year, for example, are very popular. You maybe want to do a language immersion program in a different country, in exchange programs, Outward Bound. So there's so many possibilities, and our guidance blog has a link with a ton of resources available to our students. It is still strongly recommended that if that's something that you are most likely going to do, that you still apply to college, go through the same process, and then you can defer your admission into the college, so wait a year to actually go. And I think that's it for my piece. Mr. Adebat is next.
Oh, yeah, thank you. Okay, one thing I just noticed, if everyone could open up their folders, and that first page right on the right says financial aid events at BHS. I want you to just cross out that 1, because it's not the 13th, it's the 3rd. Okay? I apologize for that mistake. Got it? Okay, well, hopefully that comes back on, but the next slide you have in your packet, you can see. So next week, the Massachusetts Educational Financial Authority, that is an organization, a nonprofit in Massachusetts. It's an organization that the members of the organization are all financial aid directors, financial aid officers. They all work in all colleges throughout Massachusetts. And next Thursday night, we're going to have Catherine Nelson here from Brandeis. She's the director of financial aid there. She's going to speak specifically about the financial aid process. I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the forms, but next week she gets really in-depth, and you'll get some really good information from her. This is now, I believe, our 7th year doing something. It's called FAFSA Day. It's actually a night. Different high schools do it at different times throughout the fall. It's a volunteer effort. Again, it's through MIFA. So financial aid officers come, we'll have financial aid officers here at the high school. We usually have about 6 or 7. We have a gentleman that comes from BC every year. He's the director of financial aid there, Northeastern, and several other colleges around the state. And what they do is they come in and we set up shop in the library and the CAF. And you, as a parent or students, you can bring your laptop, or you can feel free to use a terminal in the library, and you can actually finish or at least start your financial aid form that night for free. And the financial aid folks, they try to work with everyone that's here, and they can answer and help you kind of work through the financial aid process. Again, we've been doing that for about 6 or 7 years now. It is open to anyone in the area, so it's not necessarily, obviously we love when Burlington parents come, but we have parents from other communities as well. So again, keep that in mind. That is the correct date. So it's a Wednesday night, and it's at 6 o'clock. Again, we start up in the CAF. We have a quick little informational session, and then from there we break. Again, you have the cafeteria or to the library and auditorium. So I wanted to talk a little bit about local scholarships. So you're going to be applying, as you know, for financial aid at whatever institution your son or daughter plans to attend. But Burlington, the town of Burlington, has an unbelievable scholarship program. It's not just one organization. It's a number of organizations working together, okay? So there's the Burlington Community Scholarship Foundation. That's a 501c3 charitable organization in town. Adopt a Class. I know several of you are probably familiar with Adopt a Class. That is, there's different Adopt a Class events that have occurred, probably, if you've been in Burlington, K through 12. How many are familiar with Adopt a Class? Okay. So what that all means, all that volunteer time you put in as parents, kindergarten through 8th grade, and then 9th grade through 12th, students have been contributing time. What you're going to do is, when the application's released in February, students just need to write down all their Adopt a Class activities and submit that application. You will get a scholarship based on your commitment. Okay? So last year, for example, in the pot of Adopt a Class, I think for the graduating class, because as you probably have heard, different restaurants or businesses adopt specific classes. I forget who last year, you remember last year's? I think it was a restaurant in town. But anyway, they had worked with a class, kindergarten through 12, so they had a pot of money, well, I think it was around $30,000. And so every student that applied and met the threshold for minimum hours got a scholarship. So I think the highest amount of that specific scholarship was like right around $2,700, and then the lowest amount was $400. All right, and it's all based on commitment of time. And then Burlington High School, again, we work with a lot of scholarships out there. There's lots of memorial scholarships, civic and fraternal organizations, lots of agencies are all contributing to this program. So last year, the total amount of scholarships was close to $400,000. All right, now keep in mind, it is a combination of lots of different agencies. The tax checkoff scholarship just started last year. That, when you pay a tax bill, you give to a scholarship program. And so that money is held in an account and then distributed for scholarships. So last year, that group gave out 2 $5,000 scholarships. All right, so that's why we ask that you keep your eyes on Naviance on the scholarship application list. There are, as you heard Mrs. Leary say, about 20 scholarships listed now, but all the local scholarships are right around February vacation. That's when they'll all start to roll in. Yep. So the FAFSA form, I'm not sure how many here have had older children come through Burlington High. Okay, so there's been some changes. You've all heard of the FAFSA form. There's been some good changes, actually. Now they have a system where you can click a couple buttons, and then it automatically will pull in your tax information. So it's one less step for you. Another difference is the FAFSA for years and years became available on January 1st. So if you were applying for next fall, it would be available January 1st. but about 3 years ago, they changed it to October 1st. Okay? So that FAFSA form is going to be available October 1st. There's a lot of, you hear a lot about the FAFSA form, but at the end of the day, it takes about a half hour to 45 minutes to complete if you have all the information with you. All right, student needs to create an account, and parent, separate account, separate PIN numbers, okay? So this is, again, you heard Ms. Minty say that the financial aid process is really when parents are a big, big help to their children. That form, again, October 1st. The other form is called I should have mentioned, the FAFSA is going to see what state and federal funding is available based on your income. State and federal funding, okay? That can come in the form of grants, which that's what you want, the grants. But then there's also loans, specific loans, okay? The CSS profile, that is another financial aid document required by mostly private institutions. You may not need to fill one out. You need to determine the colleges you're applying to, and CSS actually has a website where you can see if the college you're applying to requires it. And where FAFSA is free, you do have to pay for every college you apply to, or every CSS profile you submit, and it's much more in-depth with their questioning. I think they get a little bit more personal than the FAFSA form does. And the funds are from the actual educational institution. So they're institutional funds. It's not looking at state or federal. So it's institutional funds. Kids that are applying early decision or early action, but primarily early decision, if any students here are applying early decision, usually if the college is a CSS profile school, they're going to want you to try to do that, before you apply or when you apply. Because they want to try to give you a financial aid package. If you're applying early decision, they're going to try to give you their best financial aid package they can if they're going to accept you, and so having this done would be important. So just be aware of private agencies that say they can get you X amount of dollars if you pay them. I think, most people are aware enough to again, to be on the watch for that. We've had students that went to the FAFSA website, or so they thought. She completed her entire FAFSA form, and then at the end it said $80. Well, the FAFSA form is free. So what she did is she went to a different FAFSA website, not the website through the government. She went to a private agency, and all they did was take her information and they plugged it in for her. So she lost $80 basically. Granted, it kind of did help her in the sense that she knew the information was there, but just be aware of those types of things. Okay, MCAS. So for students that participated in MCAS, they have two options. And the first is called the John and Abigail Adams Scholarship. We should rename that to tuition waiver. So what the John and Abigail Adams Award is, if a student scores in the top 25% of their class on the MCAS, so just Burlington High School students, top 25%, student gets, you'd get a letter in the mail, and the Adams recipients are going to be released in about 2 weeks. With this letter, if you go to a Mass public college or university, you will have the tuition waived. All right, so if you look at UMass Amherst, that's the example we always use, but the tuition's about $2,000 per year, and then room, board, and fees is probably about $22,000 per year. So it's not for the 22, unfortunately, but it is for the 2,000. But over 4 years, that would be $8,000. So again, that is the John and Abigail Adams, top 25%. There's no application. Students need to submit. We would just inform you in about 2 to 3 weeks. All right, so we don't even know that information yet, but we hope to have it soon. The Koplik Award. It's the same benefit, tuition waiver to a Mass public college or university, but it's not, there's an actual process behind it, and I think it's actually going to be on the next slide, yeah. So for the Koplik, a student needs to get If you qualified for the COPLIC, you would have received something in the mail last spring. So if you forgot or aren't sure, you can email me tomorrow, or students here, you can come see me tomorrow and I can check. The counselors have that information too. COPLIC, if you got that letter, that means you scored at least advanced, out of the 3 MCAS, advanced on one and at least proficient on the other 2. That's the initial qualifier. If you've met that threshold, you then complete the application, and you need to also complete 2 academic achievements. And so it's kind of spelled out, but you need to take either 2 AP tests and score a 3 or higher, 2 subject tests and meet the qualifying score. You could do 1 subject test and 1 AP, or you can do 1 test, either AP or subject test, your choice if you meet the score, and then 1 academic achievement or other academic achievement. So what is an other academic achievement? Well, dual enrollment. I think some of you are familiar with dual enrollment classes that we offer here at the school. We have different awards that students have received in the building that qualify. A Gold Key Award in the art department, any kind of academic award. We've had students that have got awards that I'm not even familiar with the specific award, but we send it into the state, and we've had several approved. Okay? So that's the COPLIC award. The deadline for the COPLIC is not until May. All right? So if you receive an Adams scholarship, I wouldn't worry about the COPLIC. All right? But if you don't receive an Adams and you want to fill out a COPLIC application, again, I'd be more than happy to walk you through it. I'm the COPLIC coordinator here at the school, but all the counselors are very familiar with that process, and we can help you if you're in an AP class or dual enrollment or plan to take an SAT subject test. We can help walk you through those 2 additional things you would need to do for the COPLIC. So when you fill out the FAFSA, it's still in effect. All 18-year-old male students must register. No federal financial aid if not registered. And this is for selective service. You can also register at post office, FAFSA application, and then you can see the website there, sss.gov. All right, so we're kind of winding down here. So after the applications go out, it's not over, unfortunately. There's still more steps that need to be completed, and these are some of those steps that we do on our end. Again, if students applying early, colleges may not see the grades when the application's sent out, but they are going to want to see the grades. So we send first quarter grades, okay? Again, depending on when your first deadline is, you know, some students kind of, we try to time it out and maybe send the application when grades become available, but some things are clear, like November 1st, grades won't be available or ready. So, but we send them shortly after, and colleges ask for those. And then mid-year, that's an automatic as well, okay? We send out the mid-year grades. So now colleges will see your first semester grade, okay? And at the end of the first semester, that's when we'll go ahead and recalculate the grade point average again. Third quarter grade, we usually don't send unless someone was waitlisted, someone was denied. We want to try to make an effort based on an improvement with that third quarter grade, but usually we're not sending those. And then certainly we'll send the final grades to the colleges you choose. Scholarship applications, like I said, right around February vacation, we'll do an assembly with the students. Actually, we have a parent breakfast in March to talk all about the scholarship program. Again, deferment or wait list, talk to us. We can kind of walk you through the steps if there is any additional steps. So your decision, when do you decide? Well, you decide May 1st is the universal deadline. By May 1st, you mail in the check, deposit check, of this college you plan to attend. And that's how you make your commitment to that school. So that's May 1st. Again, you can't send out multiple deposits. And final transcript will only go to one college, all right? We can't send out multiple. It's obviously an ethical process that we follow, and we just send out one transcript to that final college. And again, for seniors that are here, please remember that, again, you got to finish the year strong. So you got to stay strong the whole year and end on a good note because they are watching. And senioritis, again, we've heard of it. That's why I think the intern program is great because students can finish up, and if they're participating, they can essentially, you know, maybe if they're in some AP classes, they still have to be involved, but April 1st, students kind of wrap things up here at the school. And that's it. I am going to hand it over now that we've really stressed you all out to Mrs. Robinson. Excuse me, Mrs. Concession.
Joe's been calling me by my maiden name, even though I've been married for 5 years now. So as I can struggle, as I'm sure you can imagine, or you are right now, stressed out, this can be an extremely stressful time for the students and the parents at BHS and really all over the place. So just a friendly reminder, I have a little bit of a different role within the guidance department. I'm the school social worker. We have a brand new school adjustment counselor as well this year. But stress and anxiety are extremely normal during this time and really all through high school. Some level of anxiety is positive. I'm going to show you just a quick little graph about that next. But it is important to remember that 1 out of 8 students does struggle with anxiety throughout high school. And just to be cautious of that, if you notice that your son or daughter or you as a student here are starting to kind of feel overwhelmed, become upset about things easily, starting to shut down around the college application process, not wanting to talk about it, that might be signs that you should reach out and talk to someone, whether it's your parents, friends. All of the guidance counselors are here for you, and obviously there's another support team here as well. So I like this little graphic. It's called the Yerke-Dobson's Law, and I go over this with a lot of students here because I think everyone's convinced that there's no use for anxiety. But the truth of the matter is that we all have anxiety in our life, and there's a certain level of optimal anxiety. You all here clearly felt some kind of stress or anxiety that propelled you to come to a presentation to learn about how to apply to college. If you didn't have any anxiety about it and you felt fine and you didn't feel the need to be here, you'd be on the lower end of this where you kind of, you know, you weren't here, but you did. So you are at your optimal performance level. You're now here. You've reached a certain level of anxiety that's propelled you to perform or propelled you to show up for something and to do the best that you possibly can. This is the level that we're trying to get all of our students to. It's for all tests, for writing, and especially for college application process. The level that we obviously become concerned at is where you go over the hill and now you've started to kind of shut down. You're not, you know, talking to someone, you're not following through with what would be expected behaviors or expected normal expectations. So just a visual in regards to that. Oh, just give me. So how can you guys help, and seniors, how can you guys help? So we've already talked about a lot of this. Just be proactive, stay as organized as possible. However that looks for you is most important. Remind yourself that there is a college for everyone. Someone touched on this already, that, you know, something will work out. So to be supportive of your students, to remind yourself if you're a student here that something will work out. There is a college for everyone. The guidance counselors here do a great job of making sure that they talk to you guys about your list and that they feel strong and that you're in a good spot for that. If early deadlines are too overwhelming for you, apply regular. Students, don't leave your parents in the dark, okay? They want to know what's going on. Talk to them. I'm fully on board with the Miss Minty plan that if the tensions in the house are running high around conversations about college, setting an expected time frame, it really is the focus of most conversations that students are encountering right now, especially in the fall, amongst their peers, with all of their teachers, with us here in the school, and it can become extremely overwhelming. Parents, just listen carefully, watch if you feel like your kids are getting overloaded or if you're noticing things that seem off. That's a good time to sit down and have a conversation. If you feel like you need to reach out to one of us, we are here, obviously, to help support them through the process. And yeah, ask for help if need be. And I think Mr. Adebato is just going to go over some forms.
Thank you. Okay. Just real quick, in your packets, you heard a lot about Naviance. We ask parents to have their own accounts because we'll send email blasts just to parents. And we like to actually, we track our usage on Naviance. It is a cost, and we'd like to know it's cost effective that parents and students are using it. So for parents, if you'd like to sign up to get your own account, again, all the same access that your son or daughter has. On the back left, the green sheet, you would just complete that for us. You can leave it on the table in the back. We're always trying to improve. We have a evaluation form on the back right. We'd ask you to fill that out too. Any suggestions, feel free to let us know. You can leave that in the back as well. On your way out, there's a little table there. And another form that is in your packet that you don't need to give us tonight, but you could certainly give it to your son or daughter to drop off with us. You could drop it off with us, but it's the parent questionnaire, and that helps us to write the best letter of recommendation we can. It's optional, but if there's something you wanted to share with us that you think would be good for us to know as we write a letter of recommendation, please feel free to fill that out and drop that off with us.